Hello, I'm Mark from TrailBuddy. Today we're going to continue on our Ice Bear uh, clone modifications. We're trying to make this guy look like an original Honda Trail 70. We were shooting for 78 just because of the black color. Today we're going to tackle the tires. We're going to put on some of our really close to original new brand tires that we have in stock, and then we're going to try to tackle this low mount fender here and try to get it mounted up high so it looks more original. And we'll show the details of what you got to do. And what we're finding more and more is with this Ice Bear, this is so different than any other clone brand that we've ever worked with before. So keep that in mind when you're looking for replacement parts and pieces for this. Do not assume that it's the same as anyone. I mean, there's been Life and clones out there, Sky Team clones, Red Cat, you name it. There's been all kinds of different ones. So these are very different from what we are at least used to in the last 16 plus years doing this, specifically with clones. So keep a lookout. So we'll get into the tires and we'll keep making this thing look like a Honda. One key note that we do have on our website, we bought this bike here just to test fit parts. So that way we have developed a section on our website where we have test fit the parts and pieces in that section under the Ice Bear clone. So if you're worrying at all about will this part fit or not, if you go to that unique section, we've already done the legwork here of test fitting each individual part to make sure that they fit. And if it does fit but needs a little modification, we also have that in there too and what you need to do. So check it out. So to change the tires on this guy, we need to just totally take the hubs out, obviously, and the rims. But to do that, we thought we would use our bike building stand that we have. So that works with, we're going to have to just take off this center stand assembly with 4 bolts. And we'll get our bike building stand, we'll bolt it underneath it, we'll raise it up, tighten down the set screw, and then we should be able to, without any issue, be able to take off the front and rear tire up in the air and without having to use straps and everything, because we can do it all in one crack. Otherwise, what we would have done is I would go back here and I would take a tie strap and I'd tie it down and I'd work on the front end. And then as I'd work on the back end, I'd tie the front down around the center stand and I would do the rear. But it's kind of nice to be able to put that on the stand, especially if you're going to work on it for quite some time, because we are going to have to figure out how to get that fender up high. Unfortunately, the Ice Bear, that triple tree is not flat and smooth like every other thing out there is. So we're going to have to figure out how we want to tackle that guy. But we'll grab our TrailBuddy stand, we'll get it on that, and that'll help us fart around with it without worrying about the bike tipping off the lift and or on the floor if you're not working on a lift, if you're just on your garage floor. So it keeps everything really safe. It's a really nice unit to use past building. I mean, that was developed for doing restorations, and you put the motor on that stand first, and then you would put all your frame on, parts and pieces, and you would build on the motor instead of trying to get that motor up into that frame. And then I've learned the hard way you can scratch and chip paint pretty quick. So I'll grab that stand, I'll lift this up a little bit more, and we can kind of get at these bolts, and we'll get rocked. Okay, so we got the bike on the stand. It's not too hard at all. So I took the 4 bolts off that hold the center stand assembly off, and had a friend of mine pick up the rear end after I started these, because what's kind of nice about this is you can leave this tube here loose, have that under the bike, and you can bolt these 4 on, tighten them up, and then, like I said, have a friend of yours pick up the back of the bike and then just tighten that set screw right here. You don't have to get all crazy tight because a little bit of pressure really helps hold it. So now we've got it floating here. So we've got about a finger distance. That's perfect, because all we got to do is we got to slide that out. I'm gonna have a little trouble with my front end because we've got these lift tables here built with a built-in wheel chuck up front. So I'll have to probably just like turn it a little bit. But now we've got the whole thing suspended, floating here. This is designed to hold the weight of the motorcycle plus a little bit, but I would not recommend getting on this and making motor noises while it's on the stand, because that's a lot of weight. So now we'll start tearing off these front tires and we'll get these loose. Start with the rear here and the axle, and we will go from there. So for removing the rear axle, I'm going to loosen up our chain tensioner nuts here. Axle nut loose. So this is kind of similar to the original Honda, that it doesn't, on the other side of this axle, it does not have a hex head. It's got the round boss with a through hole through the side. So I usually just grab a little Phillips head, pull it in there. That's what holds it from turning. Now this rear axle nut is supposed to have a feature on the top. This is a lock nut. Like top lock nut, I believe is the right term for it. So what they do is they pinch in, and or it's got these little details in here that are supposed to help keep it from rattling off. So if you're doing this a lot, I would recommend putting some Loctite on this, because this will start to wear out slowly. It's kind of maybe similar to a nylock nut, where you maybe can only really get away with it using it maybe twice, or loosening it and tightening it. You do not want your rear axle to come loose as you're heading down the road having fun, because then you won't be having fun. All right, so pull the axle out. Make sure to save your spacer, your chain adjusters, and then just start that nut back on so at least it doesn't get lost or accidentally kick it across the garage floor. Put that on my workbench. So the cotter pin is right here. So just unbolt or unbend that rather, and then here's that brake rod I was talking about before. So there's a few little pieces here. You just want to make sure these don't get lost. So I think a good rule of thumb here is we'll, other than the spring shooting across the shop, we'll put this on so we don't lose anything. Sometimes if you get the bike tall enough, you can get away with not having to take this little anti-turn rod, your brake stay rod or plate. This is what keeps everything from turning when you hit your brakes. And it adjusts too when you adjust your chain. Here is a rear wheel assembly, and my spacer fell, so we will put everything. So there's a spacer here on the sprocket side that goes inside the little dust shield, and then on the outside of the axle, there's another one. So we will put this with that assembly. So now's a good time to make sure there's no cracks or anything. Check your chain. Everything looks good here. And now we'll move to the front. Alright, front tire assembly is out. So when you have this out, be careful not to cycle that hydraulic lever up front, because then it'll pinch your caliper together, and that'll make that hard when you want to put the tire back in. So the next thing we'll tackle here is this high mount fender while we have this all apart. So this guy, looks like there's 4 nuts holding that in, or bolts. Oh, get the speedometer gear off. I'm just going to put that right back on, because the cable inside here can pull right on out. So just be careful if this is sitting around, kicking around your shop for quite some time. You do not want to lose the internal part of your speedometer cable. So the high mount fender here obviously has these brackets on the side that work with the bosses or tabs on the forks. So what we want to do is make this look more like a Honda, stock Honda. So there's a couple options you have. One, which leaves kind of bare metal, and if you have the tools or not, is you can cut these tabs off here. Try to measure what you have up there, transfer the holes here, and then drill 2 clearance holes and bolt through. So on to tackling our fender here. So we've got one of our fenders that we have in stock for the Trail 70. We'll throw the part number to this either on the screen or in the description. So what we're used to working with the stuff that we have and sell is you can kind of see the bottom of this really relatively flush, and then when we put our fender on, it bolts on there pretty nice. Now it might tip forward right here, just like that. So it might tip forward just a little bit, but the bottom is really clean, I guess you would say, and the fender will rest right here. So on this ice bear unit, the triple tree here is got this large protruding casting and boss that's really pretty gnarly, and then the mounts here that hold the headlight mounting bracketry and your blinkers here is way lower than this plane right here. So that's going to run into some issues here. But I mean, the fender will fit. But what we need to do is I'm going to have to measure this. I'm probably just going to have to use a stack of washers for now until I actually get online, or maybe we even make something here to fill this in. So what we're shooting for is this guy here should mount right up. The bolt pattern is the same. I just got to figure out how to space this fender down a little bit to get rid of this, so we're sitting flush on these 2 mounting surfaces where they, oh well, this is nice and loose. But again, too, if you have a nice spare, I would check every fastener that you have, because every one that we've looked at so far is, not every single one, but quite a bit of them have just been finger tight or loose. But anyway, so we're going to have to get longer bolts here that we're going to use to go through our fender. So whatever I add for a stack up here is what I'm going to have to get for a longer fastener. I'll check around the shop. Maybe I've got some material that I can cut that length. There's a couple different places online that I like to use where you can get standoff spacers pre-made and ready to go. We'll tackle that. I'll have to get some longer fasteners, and I'm going to have to measure from here to here, so at least it gives me some place to start of what I need to do for a stack up. So until I can order good spacers for this, and hopefully we'll be able to come up with some kind of bolt kit that goes with the fender, but if you stack 2 8mm nuts here, it's just a little bit taller than this big nasty casting thing that's getting away. So we'll use these temporarily until I can order up or make the right spacer that's not 2 nuts. So, but for now, that'll help us get moving, and we can do a little test fitting too to make sure everything works right before we order everything up. And I got my stack up dimension now for making the right spacers instead of using the nuts. So there we go. This is our Fender Trail 70 replacement fender. Doesn't quite have the rolled lips, but it looks pretty good. And it uses the same bolt spacing here that's in the triple tree of the Ice Bear. So that all mounts up. And now we're right centered to where we want to be, to these little indentions here for the clearance. The only thing that you may have to look out for is maybe the travel of these guys. This might get pretty close to that. That's the only thing that's different from what we normally do. Again, with our triple tree, that's will allow it to mount up a little bit higher without all that junk in the way. But we can move on to making our tire assemblies and getting on the a roller for the right tread pattern. So we've got our parts all pulled. We've got our, for this one, we're just gonna use new rims. We can keep this assembly together and we can put that ice bear back the way it was later. But, so we've got our rim, we got our stainless steel bolt kit, and we've got our tubes. And the tire that we're selecting here is a spot-on copy to the original Bridgestones. These are also a better copy than the IRCs. The IRCs are pretty close, but these ones are right on. And these have been working out really well for us. So these are 400 by 10. And for reference, on the ice bear, the valve stem here is going to go opposite of the disc brake side of the forks. So I guess you could call that, as you're sitting on the bike, the right-hand side. And we'll note on the rear what that one is. But for this, I've got my axle in here just so I don't lose all my parts and pieces. But so, start taking this apart. So with the split rim, it's kind of cheating because you don't have to like worry about getting the tire on the bead. But what you do need to worry about is you do not want to pinch your tube between your split rims. So for this one, we are using straight valve stems. We are using the IRC tubes. And the nice thing about these is they come with this little jam nut here on the valve stem. We just need to match up our rim, the valve stem side, and press them into the bead. The only thing I like to add to this is I like to grab a .8mm washer to add to over the rim. That way this little nut that pulls that valve stem tight, one, doesn't scratch up your nice new rims or painted rims. Okay, so that I'm just going to leave finger tight, just keep in position. And now I've got my tube inside the tire. I've got to make sure, one, that I take that tube that's in there and I want to kind of curl it up to kind of make like a C. So that way it's not flat, because if it was flat like that, you don't want to pinch it between the two rim halves. So that one's kind of easy. You just kind of get your finger up in the side of that bead in between the rim, and you just push it or pop it up. Give it a press down, that you know that you're not going to pinch that, because I've done that before. I'm sure anybody that's really worked on these long enough have accidentally got the tube pinched between the two rim halves. So what I did just there is I rotated my bottom rim half to line up with my mounting holes here. So I'm going to give it a squeeze together, make sure that my tube is not going to get into any trouble. And I'm going to start the smaller of the fasteners. So they come with M6s and M8s. So what I'm going to do is go around and put my M6s in first. Then I'll bring the hub over here, and I'll move on to the M8s that mount the hub on. So what works easiest for me is I will take my little M6 washers. So now they come with washers and lock washers, but it's so hard to, because you got to like press that rim down. I mean, you can have it upright and kind of pinch it together like this, but it can get a little bit of a struggle because this one seems to be working pretty good. You'll work with other tires where they're really stiff and you really got to press them together. We'll try it this way. Whew, that way works too, but you really get tired pinching that together quick. There we go. One thing to note is I'm using my impact here just to speed things up to get these the initial tighten or snug. And I do not have air into the system yet because I wanted to make sure that that tube inside did not get inflated in between the rim halves and get pinched. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to get my my actual socket and ratchet, and I'm going to double check to make sure I got these good and tight. Also, isn't a bad idea to put Loctite on these guys. I pretty much like to put Loctite on anything that can fall apart and cause catastrophic problems. So the rear would be just like this assembly here. And the only thing that you want to double check that I'm seeing here on this one is these hubs have a machined flat surface, and there's kind of a decent step. So what you want to make sure is happening here, and it looks like I'm just a little off, so I'll have to try to go around and loosen these one more time. That's why I usually do, I get the little 10 millimeters about finger tight, and then I can still kind of move the rim halves around. I'll do that, and then I'll come back and I'll put the hub bolts in and get those tightened. But right here, it looks like I just got on top of the hub, and I'm not quite where I want to be to where these are all sitting flush. And what that'll help with is it'll keep that rim from shimmying or moving around when we're actually using it. So I'm going to have to go back around and loosen up some of these 10 millimeters here so I can manipulate that rim. Back where it needs to be. So we took the time, we've got all of our assemblies together. We've got our new 400 by 10 Bridgestone pattern. Now these aren't Bridgestone, these are our brand that we've been importing. They've been a really good tire for us. So we've got them all made up. So we're going to put her back together here. and get it back on all twos. So get the rear brake drum in, check the pads a second, good. The rod out of the way. Okay, so one, I make sure I've got my chain up and over so I can get it on the sprocket. And the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and put together my brake rod bar. So I've got all my parts sitting here that I put together from when I took it apart. Alright, I will wait to tighten that until I get everything together. I can put this in later. Well, let's just do that now just in case. Alright, we're all just hand tight here. Now I'll flip my chain on. And I've got all my axle and my spacer over here. So one of these guys has got to be pretty clean because that goes in to your dust seal on the sprocket side. So being that this was a little greasy, it picked up sand and junk from the workbench. I'll get that in there. Okay, so I got my axle through, got my chain adjuster on, double checked I got good movement, and I will put my corresponding chain adjuster on. And I will, not right here on camera, but I'm going to go ahead and kind of get this just so I can move it back and forth, and I will set my chain tension here with these adjusters. Then the last thing I'm going to do is tighten on my axle, tighten this nut here, and then get my cotter pin in there. And then we'll be on to the front assembly. Okay, so we got our front tire up, ready to put in. Don't forget your spacer. Make sure that it's still adequately greased. This one looks pretty good. No garbage or anything in there to eat up your seal. So now, trick with this guy is to get it in between those brake shoes. And then we've got our speedometer pickup on the other side. All right. So don't forget on the left side here for the speedometer pickup, there's a tab. You got to make sure that you get the tab here from the fork into this tab location on the speedometer pickup. So our axle nuts on. All right, so one check you want to do before you really get everything socked down tight is make sure that you don't have any binding and you didn't mess anything up. We were looking good. All right. That's got her. We are one step closer to being a clone of a clone, or a clone of the original Honda. So we've got our tread pattern now. That's the correct Trail 70 tread pattern. We've got our fender up high. We've got a cool thumper exhaust on it. We've got our rear tail light done up. Next thing we're going to probably tackle is probably graphics. We'll see if we can't get more retro looking blinkers here. So we just buttoned up our front axle. I gave it a good spin. We're making sure we're not binding or anything. One, double check that your speedometer pickup gear is on that little tab on the right side. And calipers, everything's working good. So next, what we'll do is we'll try to get our 1978 graphics on here to work with the black color that we're working with. And I think we're also going to try to see if we can get some more retro looking blinkers, help push that even further. And it is amazing how much this tire tread pattern and putting the fender up high really makes it look like an original Honda. You get back, boy, it looks pretty good. So we've got it on our bike building stand. We'll probably set it back down its tires, put the center stand back in. But that'll wrap it up for tonight. So hope you enjoyed the video. If you like what you see, check us out on mytrailbuddy.com.